Hello again. This tutorial teaches you the new, improved method of drafting documents from the decision tree that you have made in the Berkeley Studio. You do not have to know the previous method of document assembly before continuing to learn this one. We will continue from where we left off in the last video on jump lists and sources. Let's take a look. In the latest version of the Berkeley Studio, you will find an extra window named the Document Designer. This updated version of the Document Designer allows you to assemble decision tree made documents a lot swifter without losing the stylistic options that word processors like Microsoft Word can provide. Before we get into how to exactly work with the Document Designer, make sure to position the window into the left-hand side of the studio to keep your screen organized. Now, let's get started. Browse to the Document node and click the Add Document button in the top right corner. This opens up another window in which you can decide what you can call your template and what to call the end document. Select Word in the drop-down menu. For this example, we'll enter the name testreport in the template text box and choose confidential as the name of the created document. The document will appear in the Actions window. In this node, we also want to add a link to the document for the user to access it at the end of the application. This can be done by clicking the Add Link to Document button. In this window, you can type what text will link the end user to the document. Something like this will suffice. Make sure that it looks alright in the interface and continue to the next step. With this version of the Document Designer, you do not have to open an internal word processor in the Berkeley Studio in order to assemble your document. Whilst we leave the Berkeley Studio running, we open up a window of Microsoft Word and position the windows in such a way that you can see both Word and the Studio. Here, you can start composing the document that will work together with the decision tree. For example, if we write that this document is an official agreement between the vendor and the buyer, we can make sure that these names will be replaced by the actual names that are asked in the application. In the new version of the Berkeley Studio, there is an Add Text Fragment button in the top right corner. Select the vendor node and click the button to add a text fragment. Select the line of text in Word, drag it and drop it in the Edit Text Fragment window. In this value window, you can replace any word you want with information from the decision tree. If we press F6, a window opens up with an outline of all the variables in the model. To replace the name of the buyer, first select the words "the buyer", then browse to the buyer node in the variable browser. Clicking the correct variable that refers to the buyer's name in the model will put the variable in the text fragment window. If you know all of the names of your variables by heart, you can also skip the step of opening up the variable window. Just use a caret and the variable name. Now, as you can see, the text has disappeared from your Word document. However, there is an added line of text in the Document Designer window, which is the text fragment you just created. The text fragments are alphabetically sorted in this window. Dragging this line back to the Word document puts the correct variable reference in place. You can also add a text fragment under a certain condition. To quickly illustrate this, go to the Finish node in the penalty graph. Write something like this in Word and drag it to the text fragment editor in the Studio. Press F6 and select the appropriate variables for the penalty sum and the sum of money that one has to pay per day the violation is continued. We only want the text to appear if the user actually chooses to include a penalty clause. Therefore, we click the three-dotted button under Condition. Here, we make sure that the question asking for whether or not to include a penalty clause equals yes, and insert it as a condition. Click OK and drag the text fragment into Word. The beauty of the new Document Designer is that you can add any style you like to your template document. To illustrate, we can put the top fragment in bold and align the penalty clause in the center. One important thing to keep in mind when working with styles is that you should add stylistic changes after you have taken your text fragments from the Document Designer window. The publisher only saves the content of the document in the model, not the style of the document. To check if it worked, we will have to save the Word document. Three things are very important to the saving process. The first is the saving folder. Make sure that you save the document in the same folder as where you have saved your Publisher model. If you do not know where this folder is, just check the top of your running studio. Secondly, make sure that you save the document under the name that you have used in the model. So in this case, use testreport. Currently, the Berkeley Studio Document Designer only supports RTF files. This is why you will have to save your document as a .rtf file. For the final step, close the Word window and enlarge the studio again. Save and run the model. Make sure to fill in the names of the buyer and the vendor, select to include a penalty clause, and add the sums of money in the text boxes. Once you reach the document page, click the link and the document will appear. As you can see, the buyer and the vendor have been replaced by the names that you filled in. The penalty clause appears with the right numbers, and the styles you have added have remained intact. Go ahead and change your yes to the penalty question to a no, and you will see that the end document will not contain a penalty clause. Now that you know how to use the new document designer effectively, you can apply your knowledge to the NDA example. Delete the existing text fragments and navigate to the document node. Here, delete the existing link. Open up the document action and change the template name to NDA and the created document name to non-disclosure. Add a link and make sure that everything looks fine in the interface. Now, browse to the information found below this video and download the RTF file by clicking the link. Make sure to save the file as an RTF file under the name NDA in the same folder as your model. This document is a non-disclosure agreement template containing all the correct variables for the model that you made. Thus, the only things that are left for you to do is copy these to the Studio Text Fragment editor, add conditions if necessary, and copy them back in the order you got them. One thing to keep in mind is that you should make sure to always have the text fragment after the actual variable that it could refer to. This is the reason why we added the text fragment from the first example to the vendor node and not to the buyer node. You can start adding styles when your template document looks something like this. After running the application and adding some styles, you could end up with an NDA that looks like this. And now you know how to produce documents using the new method in the Berkeley Studio. To go back to the basic tutorial playlist, click this annotation. You will then be forwarded to the last video of this series, in which you will learn how to share your application online.